Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for September 15th to order. And if we could have a roll call, please.
Ann Brinkman.
Present.
Alan Bucknam.
Present.
Mark Dietrich. Present. Tracy Gildner.
Present.
Dick Matthews.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
George Pond.
Present.
Steve Tim.
Here.
Thank you. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move for approval of the order of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, call for the vote, please.
The motion passes 8-0.
I move for approval of the minutes of the September 1st, 2011 meeting.
I'll second it.
Vote, please.
And that motion passes with Commissioners Timms, Dietrich, and Brinkman abstaining. Okay.
Okay, now next on the agenda is the public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. If you are here to speak regarding anything on the agenda, such as the case before us tonight for the 30th Avenue Corridor Plan, you'll have that opportunity when we hear the case. And I don't think we have anyone. Do we have anyone speaking on an item? Yes. Hi, if you could come up and speak into the mic and give us your name and address and give us what you need to.
Thomas Slattery, 6869 West 32nd Avenue. I am here on behalf of Wheat Ridge United Neighborhoods. I would like to invite the members of the Commission, staff present, and those in the audience to submit proposed questions for our Candidates and Issues Forum on the 29th of September. Those of you on the Commission, if you have something in mind, please give it to Mr. Matthews and we'll get it from him. Or you can send it to me at teslats@q.com. That's teslats@q.com. Or you can submit it to the site that is mentioned in the mayor's email, those of you that are on the mayor's list. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, before we begin the public hearings, I'd like to remind everyone in the room, including myself and the Commission, if you have your cell phone ringer on, if you could please silence it, we'd all appreciate it. And now we'll begin the public hearings. Tonight we have one case, case number WPA-11-01, resolution recommending adoption of the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan, and by such adoption, amending the Wheat Ridge Comprehensive Plan. And do we have a presentation by staff tonight? Great.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Showalter. I'm Planner 2 in the Community Development Department, and I'm here to give the staff report on case WPA 1101, which pertains to the adoption of the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan. A quick overview of what will be included in this presentation. We'll talk about the purpose of the plan and why the city decided to undertake this effort. Quickly walk through the planning process that was used over the past about 9 months as we worked on this plan, and then talk about the plan itself, going over the vision for the future of 38th Avenue that's included in the plan, and getting into some of the most important recommendations which pertain to changes to the roadway design, big ideas for redevelopment on the private realm, and then talking about implementation and how we can actually see the plan come to fruition in the future. So in terms of the purpose of the plan, 38th Avenue is a high priority revitalization and redevelopment area in the city in a few of our adopted plans, most importantly the comprehensive plan, Envision Wheat Ridge, which was adopted in 2009 and actually calls 38th Avenue out as the city's main street and identifies it as a priority revitalization area. It's also called out in the city's strategic economic development plan as a priority redevelopment area. And Envision Wheat Ridge also has a recommendation to engage in a specific corridor plan for 38th Avenue between Sheridan and Wadsworth. So tonight when we're talking about 38th Avenue, we are talking about that stretch between Sheridan and Wadsworth. That same stretch of the street is an important focus area for Wheat Ridge 2020, which is a nonprofit in our community that does economic and community development. And because it's a priority area for them, they actually commissioned a report in 2009, at the very end of that year, that was done through the state's Department of Local Affairs and Downtown Colorado, Inc. They call it a community revitalization project, and it's something they do in communities throughout the state pretty regularly, coming into communities and giving recommendations on how to revitalize downtown areas and main streets. And one of their recommendations in that plan, which we're calling the CRP report for short, was to encourage the city to move forward with a plan that would be specific to 38th Avenue and set a vision for the street and specific policy recommendations for its future revitalization. So based on that planning context is partially why the city decided to engage in a corridor plan for 38th Avenue, again, about a year ago. And the purpose of the plan, the big one is to establish a vision for the street. Looking forward, the plan actually looks all the way out to 2030, so a pretty long-term plan really gives you the ability to think long-term about what this street could become for the community. It's to identify public and private strategies that would help revitalize 38th Avenue. And another really big reason for the plan was to study the feasibility of what we're calling a road diet, which is a term that's used for removing a lane of traffic from a street, one or more lanes, usually in order to add other amenities to the street. And that was actually a concept that was specifically recommended in the CRP report that I just mentioned that Wheat Ridge 2020 had commissioned. The team that came in to do that study was only able to look at a very kind of broad view, preliminary level, but they recognized that the street, its category compared to other streets of a similar category in the type, the number of cars it carries, it actually is over capacity. And they had the suggestion of really diving into a feasibility study on whether it might be possible to do a road diet. The concept being that by redesigning the street, we'd be able to add amenities that would help it feel and function more like a main street, as it's called out in our plans. So that was kind of the purpose that we went into starting this planning process. A consultant team was hired in the late fall of 2010, and initial existing condition work and analysis was done by city staff in late 2010 into early 2011. And starting at the beginning of the year is when we really started the public outreach that was crucial to this plan. A big component of that was forming a stakeholder committee, and that committee was appointed by the mayor. We had over 20 members. Most of the focus was trying to get property owners and business owners on the corridor itself, as well as residents who live close to the corridor. We also had representation from Livewell Wheat Ridge, who is a partner in this plan, Exempla Lutheran. Although they're not actually in the study area, they're very close to the study area. The hospital obviously is a really important destination on 38th Avenue, so we wanted to make sure that they were involved since they're very close to the western boundary of the study area at Wadsworth. We also had Jefferson County School District on that stakeholder committee, and Wheat Ridge 2020 as well, another important partner in this plan. We also had City Council and Planning Commission represented on this committee, and the committee met about 4 times throughout the process to be able to vet ideas and give us input on different recommendations that were coming up in the plan. We also wanted to get community-wide input and had 3 different public meetings. We were lucky enough to receive some funding from Live Well Wheat Ridge to be able to have those meetings and get input from the community at large. The first one that we held in March really focused on visioning and dreaming big, asking people to think about what they want the street to be in the future. And by the time we had the second meeting, we had already had all of the data come in from a traffic analysis that was looking at the feasibility of the potential road diet. So at that second meeting, what we really focused on was a bunch of different concepts for what the street could become. It was redesigned and kind of comparing that to its existing condition and getting input from people on those different design options. And then, and that feedback really influenced the recommendations that are in the plan that pertain to the roadway design. The final meeting was held recently in August. We had kind of the big ideas presented on those, what's actually recommended in the plan, and then had an open house where we had a series of tables on different topics, including the road diet, where people could ask questions and leave comments. As part of the community outreach, we also kept a website hosted on the city's website that was specific to this project, where we had information available, including presentations and notes from the public meetings that were held. We also had about a 600-person mailing list that we used for each public meeting, so that captured all of the owners that are actually on the corridor, as well as going about a couple blocks north and south of the corridor. We also got announcements for meetings up on Channel 8 and on our website, trying to get the word out that we were having these meetings. And after we had that second meeting in May and generally got a positive reaction to the concept of moving forward with the road diet, we realized that was a very important topic that we wanted to make sure particularly businesses and property owners on the corridor were aware of. So we actually sent a letter again to that entire mailing list in June, letting them know that that's where the plan was headed and giving them information. So that we're giving them contact info so that they could find out more information from city staff if they so desired. So that was an overview of the planning process. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what all that process led to and what's actually recommended in the plan that's before you tonight. One of the big or important components of the plan is the actual vision. I know this is a lot of text on a slide, so I'm just going to read it out loud. West 38th Avenue between Sheridan and Wadsworth is a safe, vibrant, and diverse corridor in Wheat Ridge with a strong identity and robust commercial and residential markets. The corridor has identifiable subdistricts, with its main street being a source of community pride and a primary destination for city residents and visitors. In the year 2030, people of all ages and abilities live, work, learn, shop, and play along 38th Avenue. And that statement was developed based on input from the stakeholder committee. We had copies of it available at the public meeting, and we also had a group of an interdisciplinary staff group that included Live Well Wheat Ridge and Wheat Ridge 2020 that helped kind of by committee and with all the input we got from the public kind of form this statement for what we hope the corridor will become. And that also led to 4 guiding principles that are kind of the cornerstones for the recommendations that you find in the plan. The first is identity, which is to redevelop 38th Avenue with a strong identity as Wheat Ridge's main street. The second is vitality, to promote economic and real estate vitality and healthy living. The third is appeal, create an attractive, comfortable, and inviting atmosphere. And finally, mobility, develop a complete street that better accommodates pedestrians, cyclists, and transit riders while maintaining adequate vehicular access and parking. Another big item that came out of the visioning was that the 1.5 mile stretch that we're looking at all the way from Sheridan to Wadsworth is really too long of an area to say that whole street is Main Street. So people really liked the idea of kind of dividing the street up into separate sub-districts, and what the plan recommends is actually 3 main districts that are actually on 38th Avenue, and then another district that's kind of already been called out in some of the city's other plans on Wadsworth. So to quickly walk through those, on this map, Sheridan is over here and Wadsworth is here. Working from the west, it's important to note too that the plan also calls out an area we can actually call downtown Wheat Ridge, which is this yellow area, and it overlaps with Main Street, since your Main Street is usually found within your downtown. And then we have the Wadsworth Town Center, which is the large purple oval there, covering most of the Wadsworth corridor between 38th and 44th. And then the smaller district that we're actually calling Main Street is roughly between about Upham, and in the early years we kind of see it being at Pierce, but hopefully as the corridor is revitalized and we see a lot more activity on the street, it could extend all the way to Newland. And so that's what you see in this area. Then we have a district that we're calling residential, and it's really important to note that for all of these districts, it's not supposed to be a prescriptive, predominant land use. So generally, the plan calls for a mix of uses all along the corridor, trying to get commercial, retail, and residential and civic uses. But recognizing that there's only so much space and demand for retail space, the idea was to try and, on this middle section of the corridor, even though other uses would certainly be allowed, try and really entice more residential development there, get new high-quality residential units on the street, so that we have residents who can actually be creating activity 24 hours a day, walking the corridor, and providing patrons for businesses on the street. And then the last sub-district is the Sheridan Commercial District. This overlaps almost entirely, well, actually it's about half of the area that was subject to the streetscape improvements that the city did in 2001. And there's already a lot of, especially at that end right close to Sheridan, existing commercial uses. So again, the idea is that all of this area would see a mix of uses, but trying to kind of focus and form identities for these different sub-districts, so that as you're moving down the corridor, there's some variety and recognition that it's quite a long stretch and each area deserves its own identity. Moving into one of the major recommendations in the plan, which is the concept to do a road diet. Just to quickly walk through, why did we even consider this in the plan? As I mentioned before, the CRP report that was done by the team commissioned by Wheat Ridge 2020 specifically recommended that the city do a feasibility study and look closely at that possibility. Another reason why we looked at it is we know that the street actually could carry more cars than it does today, so there's some flexibility and room to work with there. Another big reason is our plans say, okay, this is the main street of the community, but in a lot of ways it doesn't actually feel like a main street, and certainly in some of the community meetings we had a lot of Wheat Ridge residents saying that they don't really feel safe walking on the street, and would prefer to have an environment that is inviting. And the idea is that by doing a road diet, you gain additional room, that you can make improvements to the street to make it more pedestrian friendly. There's also a possibility that we would see fewer accidents and a greater level of safety. That's certainly been the case in some other communities that have done similar road diets. and also a potential for economic benefits in terms of higher property values, greater sales, and just generally bringing more people and activity to the corridor. Again, something that we've seen in looking at case studies in other communities. So those are kind of the main reasons why one of the big pieces of this plan was to do a detailed analysis of, could we do a road diet? Is it worth it? And get the community input on, is that something that we want to see happen on this street? And the graphics that are over here on the right basically just show the middle portion of the street today is this type of section where you have 2 through lanes in each direction and no center turn lane. And what you'll see when we get into the actual recommendations is that most of the street is proposed to be restriped to a section that looks similar to this, where you have a center turn lane and 1 in each direction. And this is just a graphic from a road diet handbook showing kind of it's a very typical road diet to take that 4-lane down to a 3-lane. We also, as I mentioned, looked at a lot of case studies, and there have been communities across the United States that have actually, road diets have been done as almost 20 years ago. We were looking at some as early as the early 1990s and learned a lot of lessons from those in terms of some of those benefits I mentioned just a minute ago, with increased property values, fewer accidents, greater safety. And a lot of the case studies we also saw, there was a lot of concern in the beginning that there'd be a lot of traffic diversion to other streets. And a few communities that have actually measured that, there hasn't been significant diversion to other routes. And we've also generally seen, which we think is natural, a lot of hesitancy and skepticism from business owners, just talking to other planners and engineers that have done this in other cities, and it's common for there to be some skepticism, but ultimately, so what the case studies we looked at, everybody sees them as a success, including businesses that are on the street. So to highlight what a few of those case studies are, this is Tacoma Street in Portland, Oregon. It's about a 1-mile commercial corridor that connects into downtown. It's similar to 38th in that it's a commercial corridor and it has a 60-foot right-of-way. Most of the section we're looking at on 38th also has a 60-foot right-of-way. It does vary in width, but the majority of the street has that dimension. Depending on which end of the street you're at, it carries anywhere from 15 to 30,000 vehicles per day. 38th Avenue carries around 16 to 17,000. And the city restriped this street from a 4-lane section to 2 lanes with a center turn lane. So again, very similar to what's, as when we get to that point, you'll see is what's proposed for 38th. And a lot of residents and property owners are very supportive of the new design, definitely like it, and the city was looking at potentially widening and changing the section again and a portion of the street going over a bridge into downtown, and actually the residents and the business owners came out and said, no, we like the street the way it is after the road diet, and we'd like to keep it that way. Another case study, this is more of a residential street in Vancouver, Washington, but it carries about the same number of cars per day as 38th Avenue, 17,000. And also was a case study we thought was worthwhile looking at because it was that same 2 sections where you have the existing section of a 4-lane, and then you reduce to a 3-lane, so you only have 1 through lane in each direction and a center turn lane. And they had specific data on the impact on safety, which was 52% fewer accidents and a 18% reduction in speed. This is another commercial street that's in West Palm Beach, Florida. It was actually went on a road diet in 1992. It was converted from a 1-way street that had 4 through lanes to a 2-way street with 2 lanes, and they added on-street parking. And the city's seen significant increase in property values. You can see on the slide they're going, in some cases doubling in the time frame in those 6 years from 1992 to 1998. Vacancies were very high on this street. It's primarily retail and some commercial. It decreased from 80% to 20%, and they've seen $300 million in private investment. And finally, a case study close to home. This is in Golden, Colorado, South Golden Road, a commercial street that carries, depending on which end of the street you're at, anywhere from 16,000 to 20,000 cars a day. The existing street in the late 90s, what the city had there was a 5-lane street. So it had 2 through lanes in each direction, 1 center turn lane, and then on-street parking. And they actually narrowed a lot of the travel lanes because they were quite wide and removed the on-street parking and used that additional room to put in sidewalks. And they've had fewer accidents, over $7 million in new development since that time, and increased sales tax revenue. And the director of public works for Golden has said that working with the business community was certainly a really important component in a lot of it's a very commercial strip, so there are a lot of businesses there, and they were initially skeptical, but have actually really liked the results. Traffic's generally going a little bit slower, and the businesses actually like that. They find more people are noticing them and stopping by. And this is a graph from Golden that shows their sales tax revenue on the portion of the street that was narrowed. And starting in 2000, which is over here, going up to 2010, they've seen a steady increase ever since they implemented their road diet in 1999. So all of those case studies were, one of many reasons why we wanted to move forward with at least looking at the concept of a road diet. Another reason why was we had hired a consultant team. One of their specific tasks was to complete an analysis that would essentially run a model and look at what would happen to traffic flow on the street if it was reduced to a 3-lane street. Similar to some of the case studies we looked at there, what was the assumption that was put into the model was having 1 through lane in each direction and a clear, continuous center turn lane down the middle. One of the big assumptions for the model was how many cars to actually run through the street every day at peak hour. And this graph actually shows previous traffic counts that were taken on the street starting in the 60s for when the city has data. And each little dot represents an actual number. This is 16,000 cars, this is 20,000 cars. And generally it's hovered, except for this one kind of blip up here, it's generally hovered around 16 to 17,000 cars. And this blue line here is kind of a trend line if you average all of those into growth. And if you continued that trend line, it would be this bottom blue dash line here. To be conservative, the traffic model actually projected all the way up to this level, which is about a 15% increase, recognizing that the whole point is to try and revitalize the corridor and get more cars to come to the street. So we want to factor in, if we're going to look at potential impacts on traffic flow, having even more cars on the street than we do today. And essentially the results of the traffic analysis were that there would certainly be an impact on the street. We would see some changes in terms of overall traffic flow, but they would be minimal enough that you still retain an acceptable level of service and fairly free-flowing traffic to the point that you have those acceptable levels. It did find that one of the big metrics it looked at is, well, how long would it take to get from Wadsworth to Sheridan or Sheridan to Wadsworth? And this is assuming peak hour traffic, and again, the higher traffic numbers that were projected, we had that growth into the future, and it showed anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds added onto your trip for that entire length. Another important thing that it showed is that we really can't have a 3-lane section all the way up to Wadsworth and all the way up to Sheridan. Those are obviously really major arterial streets that carry a lot of traffic each day. We have a lot of turning movements at those streets. So if we're going to restripe the street, we need to transition back out into the existing condition as you approach those major arterials. So this is showing what those where those transition areas would be. So the restriping would actually be approximately from Teller to Depew, and then you would transition back out into the existing sections that are wider. So we had the results from that traffic study pretty early on in the process, and as I mentioned before, one of the big goals of the second public meeting that we had in May was to share those results and then talk about, since this the traffic analysis is showing that we'd have fairly minimal impact on traffic flow on the corridor, what would people like to see? You know, do we like the concept of maybe going ahead and taking out a lane in each direction? And if we did that, what could we add to the street? How could we repurpose those lanes that are being removed? And a lot of options were presented. One of the big things we did was have people actually prioritize. We broke out into small groups and said, here's kind of 3 main things that could be added to the street. Which ones, you know, are most important to you? And those 3 things were amenity zone, which is the term that's used for the space between the sidewalk and the roadway, where you can have room to put in street trees and benches and pedestrian lighting. The second one was on-street parking, the concept of actually being able to add some on-street parking on the street. On-street parking obviously serves businesses that would be on the street. It's convenient parking for customers to hop out and access the front door of a business. It also provides a buffer between the sidewalk area and the roadway, so it's another element that can help kind of calm traffic or provide a buffer for pedestrians between moving traffic. And generally what people said they'd like to see are the amenity zones. That was kind of the number one priority, I think, in pretty much every breakout group that we had. Although they did like the idea of having on-street parking, at least in some locations, especially where it made sense, given the adjacent land use. So we also heard a lot of, you know, let's not just pick one approach for the entire stretch and try and vary it. So in some places you might actually add some more room to get an amenity zone with a street tree, and in other places you might have parking. We also heard we had presented the concept of short-term options, which can be done without actually moving the curbs, which is very expensive compared to restriping, versus also exploring those longer-term options that are more expensive, where you do move the curb and actually can have more of an impact on the design, especially if you're trying to create amenity zones and sidewalks. And we heard generally a lot of feedback that let's try a short-term restriping area that can be implemented in the near term, just to see actually some change out on the street and give us a chance to actually test the road diet concept. And generally also not just in the design of the street, but the design of the streetscape, try and vary the different sub-districts. Again, getting back to that they deserve to have their own identity as you're moving along this long stretch. And the picture you see there is we actually asked people to vote at the second meeting if they were in support of the road diet, and pretty much everybody raised their hand. So based on that public input, we said, okay, let's move forward with what could this actually look like at a very conceptual level. There's no detailed design at this point. And the concept is actually varied depending on what district you're in, since we heard that people liked that idea. So the first that you see on this map, as you move from the transition that we had talked about down from the existing wide section into the 3 lanes, is the Main Street district. And then there's the residential district, which partially overlaps with the existing streetscape improvements that go out to Harlan. And then the Sheridan Commercial District, which really is not part of the road diet. So that kind of breaks down. And within the residential district, the idea is to try and do some planters and enhancements to create street trees there, but that would not be proposed for this area, starting east of Harlan, because we already have tree lawns that were part of the streetscape improvements that were done in 2001. So the proposal in the short term is to actually restripe the Main Street and residential districts, that 3-lane section, and then to actually look at what we can do with the additional room that's created from restriping. So in the Main Street district, the concept is to add what we're calling a temporary amenity zone. Since we're not moving the curbs, you can't actually create the room that you need in the concrete. to make a permanent sidewalk and amenity zone with trees. And I'll show you a photo in a minute of what a temporary amenity zone could be. In the residential district, it's what we're calling a retrofit planter, which is actually a curbed kind of permanent feature that could have a street tree planted in it, and we'll have a photo of that as well. And then also some demonstration curb cut consolidations. If we're going to add on-street parking, there'd also be room to do that as part of the road diet. It's only going to work in some key areas where we have either a very long access point onto the street. Some properties, almost their whole frontage is one long access point, or duplicative ones that could be consolidated. So the idea in the short term is to kind of do a bunch of demonstrations. So demonstration curb cut consolidation would be, instead of actually, we're not moving curbs, we're not pouring concrete, it would be to actually use planters or ballers, some temporary measures to just test, what could happen if we actually closed off one of these curb cuts and put on-street parking there instead. So everything in the short term is they're not permanent changes. And this is the section that kind of shows what that would be in the Main Street area. So you have one continuous center turn lane here in the middle, one lane in one direction, another lane in the other direction, and then additional room here to do the on-street parking or those temporary amenity zones that I had mentioned, so that we can try and actually create the feel of what if the sidewalk one day was actually able to be that wide, so that we could put in street trees and other improvements. You'll notice there's only on-street parking on one side of the street, and that's because, given the existing right-of-way, that's all there's room for. And the approach here is obviously to take some of the guidance we got from the public input, which is, in some places try out the on-street parking, and other places try out the temporary amenity zone, since people liked having both. And this is a photograph of what that temporary amenity zone could look like. There's a lot of communities that are repurposing parts of their streets, oftentimes parking spaces in the street, to create what they're calling parks or cafe zones. This is actually in downtown Louisville. They're temporary. They actually take these down in the winter. And the idea is that we could do some of these, in cooperation with adjacent business owners on the corridor. If it's in front of a restaurant, you might do what you see here, where you have some seating associated with that restaurant for outdoor dining. In other places, we like it to be more like what a traditional sidewalk would be, which is benches and planters, just a pleasant environment for anybody who wants to kind of walk in, sit down, and enjoy. Moving into the residential district, the idea here is a similar section where you have that center turn lane and one through lane of traffic in each direction, and then room here to do, again, a lane of on-street parking. But in some key areas, we're proposing to do a retrofit planter, which is actually a permanent installation with a concrete curb around it and wide enough to grow a street tree. And unfortunately, there's not room to do it on both sides. And a photograph of what that would look like is here. And you'll see when we get to the long-term recommendations, there's no proposal to ever move the curbs in the residential district, so that's why we're proposing these more permanent planters. They are more expensive, but they, because they're a permanent installation, but we think that they make sense in that area, because there's no proposal to come back sometime in the future and actually move the curbs and then take out those planters that we had already put an investment in. The plan does talk about looking forward to a more long-term design, especially because we heard so much input about wanting to see amenity zones on both sides of the street and a real pedestrian environment, and that's very difficult to do without actually moving the curbs. So just in the Main Street district, where a lot of people felt was the most important area to focus on the pedestrian activity, and really trying to get as much activity and revitalization as possible, the plan does call for further study looking at moving the curbs So in this section, what you see, we've actually reduced the width of the roadway from curb to curb. And this is one option that would be available in the Main Street District. It actually fits completely within the 60-foot right-of-way that's exists in some portions of that district. So we actually have more right-of-way in some areas. It gets up to as much as about 70. But within this tightest dimension, you would be able to, if you move the curbs, create room to have a 6-foot sidewalk and about a 6-foot amenity zone on each side. What you're not able to fit in this case is the on-street parking. This is another option for Main Street where you could move the curbs and have the 3-lane section, which you see here, 1 lane of on-street parking, and the amenity zones and sidewalks on both sides. This option, though, takes up 70 feet of total right-of-way width from here to here. So you would need, in some parts of the street, we actually already have that width. In some other parts, it would require taking an easement across existing property. And there's different options in the plan for that. One is that you wait to build these improvements that require that easement until a property redevelops, so that you're not impacting an existing use. Before I move into the private realm big ideas, I did just want to note, I mentioned that one of the options that came up as what could be added to the street if we did a road diet was bike lanes. And one of the, we kind of consistently heard from a lot of people that in an ideal world, if we had all the right-of-way width to work with, people would really like to see bike lanes added on 38th Avenue and really make it multimodal. So we're addressing sidewalks for pedestrians, traffic lanes for cars, and bike lanes for bikes. But since there is a very limited right-of-way, most groups ranked that amenity as their third preference for what they'd add to the street, noting that there are parallel routes, like 32nd, that have fewer cars and already take a lot of bikers. And really focusing on, okay, maybe this street is not going to be one of our major bike corridors, but let's at least try and get some bike parking, which is one thing the plan calls for as part of the streetscape design, so that people who live nearby can at least bike to the corridor easily. Also, if the road diet's implemented and traffic does slow down, there's a lot of cars that are driving way above the speed limit today. And generally, if a street feels narrower, cars move slower, it could make it a little safer for bikers, even though they wouldn't have a designated lane. So that's kind of just a little context on why the plan is not actually calling for the bike lanes. So that was kind of getting through the all of the meat of the road diet proposal. Now I want to briefly walk through some of the other recommendations in the plan, focusing on kind of the key big ideas. And this is everything related to the road diet is really what we can do in the public realm and the public right-of-way. This next part is about what happens on private property outside of the public realm. The concept is to try and encourage mixed-use development on the corridor. The plan does recommend pursuing new mixed-use zoning on the street that would encourage that. A really big idea in the plan is to try and bring a civic center to 38th Avenue. A lot of main streets and downtowns have a civic presence on the street that we don't have on 38th today. And the idea is that could bring a lot of activity and a nice synergy of uses, bringing more customers for businesses that are nearby and just creating a lot more activity. Their other big idea is to just try and focus as much as possible on the Main Street district for mixed-use development, which is really, I should say, between Upham and Newland, knowing that that Wadsworth end is really part of the Wadsworth Town Center and the Wadsworth corridor. Another big idea is to try and create parking reservoirs on the corridor. There's over 3,000 parking spots today on the street and on private property along the street. We definitely don't see a dearth of parking today, but as we were having our stakeholder committee and public meetings, a lot of people, when they thought about places that they would like 38th to be like in the Denver area, are also places that it can be a hard time to find a parking spot. so we can plan ahead for that. And if the vision is for the street to become a true main street and have a lot of customers and activity, where can we create parking reservoirs so that people can easily get to the corridor, park their car, and then maybe get out and walk a few blocks to wherever their destination is. And this graphic is going to be pretty hard to see for most of the people that are sitting back in the room, but essentially it's just a concept. It's certainly not prescribing specific design or what's going to happen, because a lot of this development will be up to the private realm, but it's showing the private sector, I should say. It's showing concepts for where there could be some key development sites within the Main Street district. Just to orient folks, this is the existing Safeway store over here. This is Wheat Ridge Cyclery. This kind of large building here is Wheat Ridge Middle School. And what it's showing kind of as a very big concept is the idea that we could potentially fit a civic center in here. Not only City Hall, which you see here, but a separate building for our police department, as well as another civic building here that could have just general office space in it, but also room for other civic uses. A library is an example that's come up a lot that people would like to see on 38th Avenue. And then it also shows the concept of actually utilizing the surface parking lot and kind of unused green space that's in front of the middle school today as a development site, so that we could get buildings built close up to the street in the Main Street district, kind of mirroring the existing streetscape that's on the south side here, where we actually have some more historic buildings built close to the street, and then develop a parking reservoir here that could serve adjacent businesses as well as the Civic Center. And another component I should mention that we heard a lot of is people would like to see more open space on the corridor. We don't really have any today. So it's a little hard to see since this is at such a detailed level, but it does actually build in the concept of having some key green connectors and plazas that would go out to 38th Avenue, as well as proposed community gardens around the school. And this is kind of zooming in a little bit more on a 3D view of what that might look like with Upham Street here. This is High Court and Wheat Ridge Cyclery. The buildings in white are existing buildings. It's showing the same plan we looked at, just a little closer up. So you have City Hall and a police department over here, mixed-use buildings with civic space here, retail with 2 to 3 stories. You could have office or residential above, kind of lining the street, and a parking reservoir. Another big component of the plan is talking about implementation and how would some of these big ideas that I've just talked about actually be implemented. A very key step in the plan is to create a leadership committee. The idea is that Wheat Ridge 2020 and the city in particular would work to get this group together. That would be primarily composed of stakeholders that are actually on the corridor, and they would really kind of take the lead on saying, how do we move this plan forward and really start to revitalize 38th Avenue. Another really key short-term implementation step is that short-term road diet concept that I talked about, where we're just restriping the street without moving any curbs, in combination with some demonstration projects, the temporary amenity zones, and the retrofit planters in the residential district. And another really big step, the plan focuses a lot on how do we actually start branding and marketing the street? How do we create an identity that makes 38th recognizable to people even outside of the city so that they want to come and visit it? And we really see the leadership committee playing a big role in that. How do we actually develop a marketing strategy for this corridor that will help inform the streetscape design, banners, and signage that we hope to find on the street one day. Longer term implementation, finalizing what a permanent roadway design could be. The plan actually calls for after about 18 months after the restriping to assess the impacts of that and look at things like the number of cars that are on the street after we do the restriping for the road diet, look at sales tax for businesses, revenues that have been collected for the businesses on the street, and try and see what kind of impact there is, and help that inform, as well as obviously just direct feedback from people that are using the street every day, what a permanent design might look like. That would also entail having to identify a funding source for a permanent design. The restriping is a small enough number that it's something the city could do with its existing capital improvement dollars. But a more permanent redesign that would involve significant streetscaping and moving the curbs is much more expensive. Another big long-term implementation step is pursuing how could we create Civic Center on 38th Avenue. Obviously, another higher ticket item that we would have to be identifying a funding source. For reconstructing the street or Civic Center, certainly one option would be creating a local revenue source, such as bonds that could be financed by a temporary increase in sales tax, which would have to be approved by voters. But the plan has different ideas, but a local revenue source is definitely one that's recommended for further consideration. And then long term, we have this leadership committee we talk about forming in the short term, but the idea is that in the long term, a more permanent structure, whether it's a merchants association or some kind of district, could actually form for the corridor to be kind of the big promoter for 38th Avenue, successfully marketing and branding the corridor. And most commercial streets you see that kind of have a successful marketing campaign like that have some kind of organized group of business and or property owners. So the idea would be that the leadership committee could explore what might be the right structure for 38th, and obviously that will involve really close coordination with the property and business owners. In terms of funding, as I mentioned, the restriping that's recommended in the short term, the proposal is to actually use money that's in the city's budget, will be requested to be in the city's budget for 2012. The number's around $200,000, and that would include restriping the street as well as being able to do those demonstration projects. In terms of a long-term redesign, we have very preliminary estimates since we don't have an actual design for the street, but an estimate would be in the Main Street district anywhere from about $3.5 to $4.5 million to actually move the curbs, redesign the street, and do a full streetscaping enhancements. In the residential district, the price is lower because we're not actually looking at moving the curbs. It would be more about just building the streetscape improvements. But still both big ticket items that would have to be, funding would have to be identified, and that's a major recommendation is to explore those funding options. And then of course the Civic Center, as I mentioned, is another item where we're looking at what are potential options as well as a local source that can create some revenue for those kind of improvements. So finally, the next steps is after tonight, we do have a study session scheduled with City Council on October 3rd to talk about the major recommendations in the plan, and then a public hearing for adoption is scheduled right now for October 10th. And I'm finally done. That's all.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Normally, now we would hear from the applicant, but I think in this case, maybe we should, do we want to ask questions of staff first and then maybe get some feedback and input from the public? Does that sound good? Okay. So any questions for Sarah or Ken or Mr. Paranto? George? Ann? Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by the traffic studies because basically it says that one of the benefits of doing this is slower traffic speeds, but that the travel time will not be changed any significant amount, and that doesn't seem to me like that's a consistent part of the traffic study.
Well, I'll start, and if Tim, our Director of Public Works, wants to chime in, please do. But my understanding is that well, first of all, the traffic study does show that travel time would increase. So it will take longer to get from one end of the corridor to the other. It's just that it's a matter of seconds instead of several minutes. Another thing to think about is that sometimes it might feel like you're going faster because you have the ability to actually get around a car if you have 2 lanes of traffic like the street does today. And you may end up still having to be spaced out at different intersections that have traffic lights, so you can go faster and then you wait at a traffic light, and then you go faster and you wait at a traffic light. So you're actually moving faster in your vehicle while you're traveling, but once you add in the time that you had to wait at a traffic light and add up the total travel time from Wadsworth to Sheridan, it's not that big of a difference. Does that make sense? You see what No, I hear no. Seeing some nodding, some looks of, when you're actually, if you have 2 lanes and the ability to get around a car that might actually be going the speed limit, you can move faster. But overall, if you're traveling the whole length of the corridor, you're probably going to end up waiting at least a couple of lights. So while you're moving, you're going faster. But if you add up the amount of time it actually takes you to get from the same distance, it's going to be comparable. And again, the traffic analysis does show that it will take longer. It's just by an amount that doesn't create unacceptable levels of congestion on the street. Do you have anything to?
Yes, I guess to give you numbers, the traffic study is indicating that today it takes between 200 and 220 seconds to drive from one end of the corridor to the other. And with the road diet in place, that will increase between 10 and 20%, which is 20 to 40 seconds longer. So if you think of it in percentages, it's going to take you 10 to 20% longer to go from one end to the other with the three-lane section over part of that. So that's really the relative numbers. 200 goes up to 220 to 240.
The only other thing I would add is maybe, especially in non-peak hours, maybe traffic won't go that much slower. One of the things that has come up in the process, a lot of people have asked, well, are you going to change the speed limit on the street? If you're making these changes, especially with the addition of on-street parking on one side. And one of the next steps in the plan is in evaluating a longer-term redesign is to do a speed study and look at, after you make these changes, are cars actually going slower? Does it make sense to maybe drop the speed limit by 5 miles per hour?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment that I know from personal experience. I currently do divert off of West 38th Avenue anytime that I think that a street zone or the school zone light is going to be on with a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I currently actually already divert away from 38th Avenue to avoid that. So.
Other questions for Sarah? George? Okay. Sorry, just to expand on that a little bit, it looks like in the traffic study it indicated that if you were to divert, say, to 35th or 32nd, for example, eastbound and westbound, the diversion time would actually be equal to or greater than the additional time increase in travel time. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, that's correct. Diversion was a big issue that we heard from a lot of people is, obviously we don't want to be driving cars away from the street, and so the analysis looked at that in particular, and for those alternate routes, in most cases it was equal to or greater time.
Okay. You mentioned in your presentation that 38th was over capacity. I assume you meant underutilized. It's overbuilt.
Overbuilt, yeah.
Okay. All right, since no one else is ready, I'm just going to keep going. We've talked a little bit about cyclists and the desire for building complete streets. and also the desire the greater desire for on-street parking and amenity zones, which I completely understand. But since we do have, as the report indicates, the household characteristics, lower median household income, lower average number of vehicles per household, increased demand for pedestrian and bicycle-friendly streets, I'm wondering why we're not seeing in this plan some alternatives in terms of cycling, encouraging the use of 35th as the designated bike corridor through maybe an inclusion of painting some of those sharrows or shared bike lanes to both educate motorists on 35th that it is a bike corridor, and also encourage cyclists onto 35th and maybe away from 38th. Is that something you guys considered?
Yeah, well, it's actually 35th between Pierce and Sheridan is already called out in the city's bicycle pedestrian master plan as a street that should gain exactly what you said, shared facilities or sharrows. So what the plan talks about is just reiterating that because we're not going to have the connection on 38th, that it's very important to make sure that that other route is implemented, which is already called for in the master plan as a parallel route. And it also calls for a lane on Pierce, so you could even connect to 38th if you're trying to reach 38th from 35th.
I guess I'm just curious, since there are specific there's a specific phased timeline for example, for the restriping. Could you refresh my memory if in the bike and pedestrian master plan is there some specific timeline for adding that shared facility on 35th?
There's not that I'm aware of a specific time frame. Tim, I don't know if you know.
There is not, and we actually do have priorities set in the bike ped master plan. It's fairly low priority for 35th. Reason for that is those that are familiar with the areas, there isn't an abundance of bike traffic at those streets today. So in the bike ped master plan, the higher traveled streets by pedestrians and bicyclists are to be addressed first. If we saw that there was a greater need, we could, of course, address 35th if we had that.
Okay.
But today it doesn't appear we don't have many bicyclists on 38th at this point either. So if you don't need it, you don't need necessarily to build it.
Sure. I just bring it up because bicycling cyclists they're mentioned. Those words are mentioned almost as many times as the word pedestrian in this plan, and there aren't really any facilities called out for cycling. And since it seems to be something that was given so much verbiage in the report, I wanted to make sure that we were actually addressing those needs one way or another, whether it's mitigating the lack of services on 38th by accommodating or encouraging use on alternate roads such as 35th or even 32nd, even though, I know there's a whole other issue with 32nd in terms of biking, right of way and striping and stuff. I just wanted to make sure we were, acknowledging the fact that, okay, we're talking about in the report how we want to have these complete streets, but we're not really saying how we're going to address the needs of that particular mode of transportation. I'm sorry, that ended up being more of a comment than a question. George, did you have something?
Two things. I noticed in the report it calls out for the creation of a transitional leadership committee very soon, in 2 or 3 months. And you mentioned that, I just want to clarify that would be created in conjunction with community development and We Ridge 2020.
That's correct.
And that the proposal for short-term funding at approximately $230,000 would be for a combination of restriping and temporary amenity zones, as well as those permanent tree planters in the residential zone?
That's correct. That dollar amount, the 230,000, would be for 4 of those temporary amenity zones and 2 of the planters in the residential district.
About how long? How many linear feet or of?
So each amenities, that'd be about 80 linear feet for the amenity zones in Main Street, and also 80. The planters are budgeted at 40 feet in length, so also 80 feet in the residential district.
Thanks.
Other questions, Ann?
This isn't a question. I just want to clarify. I was on the stakeholder committee, and we did have Wheat Ridge Cyclery there. Correct me if I'm wrong in my memory, but wasn't there agreement that because 38th Avenue is not continue through Denver as a major bicycle corridor, and the management at Wheat Ridge Cyclery agreed that 38th Avenue initially in the phase 1 and phase 2 wouldn't be the best area for bicycling. Mm-hmm. Okay. That there's other streets coming in from Denver and there's other streets going out from away this area other than 38th Avenue.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I should have mentioned in my presentation. That was yet another reason why bike lanes were not proposed, is there's not a route on either end to connect to. And in fact, in Denver, on that east end, 35th is a route, which is one reason why it's identified in our master plan, so you have that contiguous connection into Denver.
Okay. And then there's 2 areas that I'd like you to clarify. The first is with regards to emergency access, ambulances and fire trucks, and the use of on 38th. If you see any impediments or any safety issues with using that, and if there was any study on its use by those vehicles now. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, and Dick alluded to it, the school zone and the impact of bus traffic for the middle school, specifically off of High Court, thank you, during those peak times with the buses. And explain, if you could, the way that they come in and out of that area, just to make sure I understand.
Okay. I'm not sure that I'll be able to explain the details of the school bus, how they use that. I know that our traffic engineers and the traffic consultants spoke directly with the school district on that issue. So I'll share what I know, and Tim might be able to add more, or Ken. So in terms of the first question with the emergency vehicles, that was certainly an issue that came up early in the process because of the hospital being there and because we have the fire district. Wheat Ridge Fire District, as everyone probably knows, is located right off the corridor on Upham Street. So we engaged both of those parties early on, and the hospital is actually on the stakeholder committee. We've met with the fire district and talked with them, and both are comfortable with the design, don't see any issues. Part of that is because there is a clear, continuous center turn lane. Parts of 38 that already have that turn lane today, where you see a 5-lane section, I've noticed emergency vehicles using that turn lane to get around traffic already, so it'll be the same concept. The fire district did note, obviously, if you only have one through lane and they actually have to stop out on the street for some reason to service a property, that then cars could be waiting behind that vehicle, and the cars might actually have to use the center turn lane to get around their truck, and that could back traffic up. But they were comfortable with that, did not see any major issues with the design from either party. And in terms of the school buses, I know that that's something that we did have some concern from the school with, especially because you think about the timing with peak hour and having already a lot of, as school's getting out in the afternoon, if you already have people starting on their way home. And our traffic consultant was not able to look, we were looking at the corridor as a whole and not impacts of one's particular use. But he did go back and kind of look at the numbers after we heard that concern, and particularly for that intersection at High Court, and felt that the general growth in traffic that was accounted for already kind of captured the fact that you might have more cars at that intersection at a certain time when the buses are coming out. In terms of how the buses actually circulate and use that intersection, I don't know. I'm not sure if Tim or Ken has any more information on that one, but I know we've specifically engaged with them, and one of the reasons, another thing I should have mentioned, this is more related to the emergency vehicles, but one of the reasons why the neck down to the 3 lanes that's proposed where it is so that the emergency vehicles coming out of Upham from the fire district are able to turn right and go towards Wadsworth without dealing with that with the 3-lane section.
I can actually offer a little bit of insight just as a parent of students.
Great,
Stevens. Yeah. As you may or may not know, Stevens and Wheat Ridge Middle are now all letting out at exactly the same time, and they're letting out about half an hour later than they used to, almost at 4 o'clock now. Because Martinson Elementary is closed, there are now more buses at Stevens than there used to be. Some of those buses actually, I think, consolidate a pickup after they pick up at Stevens and they go to Wheat Ridge Middle. Some, which means then they also they turn on to 38th from High Court, where Wheat Ridge Cyclery is. Others that depart directly from Stevens actually go straight up Reed, and they'll execute either left-hand or right-hand turns, depending on which way they're headed. So the fact that there's no lighted intersection at Reed actually, to me, is more of an issue than necessarily just the fact that all the buses are leaving at the same time. And that's probably sort of out of the scope of this particular discussion, something maybe we should address with the folks at the school. But it is something to keep in mind for the future, just as development gets a little denser in that area.
Thanks.
I don't have anything else right now.
Scott, you have anything? Steve, Mark, Tracy? Okay. All right. Can we ask more questions of you later?
Of course.
All right. Sarah, could you bring up the list of folks from, thanks. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'll call your name, and if you would like to come up and give us a comment or ask us a question that maybe we can address to staff once we've heard from everybody, we'd love to have your participation. If we call your name and your question has been answered or your comment has been made and you don't feel like you want to come up and speak, that's fine too. So I'll just start with the first stack here. Let's see. Denise Balkus from Wheat Ridge 2020. And if I could ask everyone who speaks to try and limit their comments to 3 minutes if possible, because we do have quite a few people who look like they wish to speak. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Denise Balkus. I am the real estate director for Wheat Ridge 2020. Wheat Ridge 2020 is a nonprofit economic development corporation. We are a membership organization, and our offices are on the corner of 38th Avenue, the southeast corner of 38th Avenue and Marshall. And I'm here tonight representing Wheat Ridge 2020 to speak in favor of the plan. Since our organization has been founded, our main geographic area, priority area of the city is east of Wadsworth. And all of our strategic plans have recognized West 38th 38th Avenue as a priority for our board of directors. And in terms of the street, our activities have ranged from planning activities to actual bricks and mortar projects, such as making loans to businesses on 38th. So we have a long-term interest in the corridor since we've been founded. And the board has always taken the position that West 38th Avenue is both a mix of preserving existing businesses and properties as well as welcoming new businesses, properties, and residents into the corridor. So it's been a balance of those two objectives in the revitalization process. As Sarah mentioned in her presentation, in 2009 we applied for some funding from the state of Colorado to conduct a 2-day visit of a group of revitalization experts that volunteer their time and go around to small communities in Colorado and look at a particular issue. And in our case, we invited them out to look at 38th Avenue. It had been a long-term interest of the community and our board, and to really say what can jumpstart this process. There's been an awful lot of talk over the years. How do we do this? So there was really literally 2 full days of intense analysis by this group, and also a public participation process that was about 60 residents and businesses in the community. And at the end of those 2 days, they produced an action plan, and it set a big picture framework for the corridor. After that process was done, I think there was excitement in the community to keep moving and to do the next steps. And one of the next steps in the action plan was the development of the plan that you're considering tonight. And so there was, again, there's been a long-term process here. It hasn't been random about revitalization. We've tried to focus in, create a plan, and then work on chipping away at the various things we need to do to revitalize the corridor. So we got to the point where the city again, retained a consultant and worked with staff and the community to create the plan before you tonight. Our board, our members, and our staff participated every step of the way. We contributed our membership list, and we helped with emails and mailings and outreach. We participated on the stakeholder committee, and at the various public meetings. It's our conclusion that the process was open, it was inclusive. If you wanted to participate, the city did afford you every opportunity you could to participate with your neighbors and your fellow businesses and, work on issues as you saw them. So we felt that was a solid, strong process that got us to this point. And there really was no reason, again, if you wanted to participate, that you didn't have every opportunity to. The Planning Committee of Wheat Ridge 2020 at their meeting last month reviewed everything that really you're reviewing tonight, and they did vote unanimously to recommend to our board that this plan be adopted. So I am bringing that recommendation to you tonight. We have already begun to think about and are securing funding sources to implement many of the things in this plan, such as a marketing and branding strategy. We've applied for funding to conduct that activity. We had not heard on that yet, but we have begun that process. So tonight, again, on behalf of Wheat Ridge 2020, we strongly support this plan, and we feel we're ready to move away to get on to implementation. The planning has been a very strong process. Let's move into working on various projects and get this corridor going. The other thing we also realize is that tonight is certainly not the end of the citizen participation. Any kind of a project that we work on, whether it's a development project or restriping of the street, is going to have a lot more discussion, most likely come before both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this is certainly not the end of the process,
Ms. Balkus, I'm going to have to ask
running
you
over?
to
All right.
abridge your comments.
Thank you. And then what I want to submit for the record is a flow chart that Wheat Ridge 2020 did as part of some of the grants we applied for, which really kind of goes through all the steps that got us to this point today. So
Great.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Russ Redig, would you like to speak? Great. If you can come up and give us your name and address, please, and your comments.
I'm Russ Redig, I represent A1 Rental, 7080 West 38th Avenue. I was also on the stakeholder committee. I have opposite view of 2020. I think this is not a good plan. Anytime you restrict traffic or flow to my business, it's detrimental to me being here. We've been on 38th Avenue over 50 years, longer than Wheat Ridge has been an incorporated city. And just in the last few days, I just started asking my customers, if you perceive 38th Avenue as being a narrowed down street and your commute will take longer, would you avoid 38th Avenue? Would you avoid the merchants along 38th Avenue? And I thought 10%, 15% might say that. Out of 65 people, 63 of them said they would avoid 38th Avenue. Now, from a business owner standpoint, you know, that many of my customers saying, I will divert, I'll find somewhere else to go. I won't be here. Their 18-month trial, I won't be here. We'll be out of business. And if you have a restaurant or something, it might be a good thing, but where it is, I don't think so. As far as the road diet goes, every time I went to any of those meetings, they all said it shows no diversion, the traffic flow is the same. If you pull up some, I've found traffic capacity from 20 other cities. Out of the 20, after it was done, 7 of them were actually down. 6 of them stayed the same, and 7 actually went up a little bit. So if you look at that, it's a third of the roads that they did this on reduced traffic flow. And all of them are about reducing the speed, and most of them are about enhanced pedestrian and cycle. When they're doing this road diets around the country, it's to get those in. I just think that 38th Avenue is the wrong corridor for that. We've spent a lot of money widening that road. Where I am at that end, we have a center turn lane already. I don't see why we need to narrow it down with a center turn lane. We have a center turn lane. Now, east of Pierce, there isn't a center turn lane. Might make a little more sense there because of traffic, rear end accidents might be eliminated with a center turn lane, but it's not going to benefit my company whatsoever. And if people perceive that it's difficult to get to, even if it's not, even if there's no difference in travel time, if there's that perception, just like Mr. Matthews said, I already divert because of the school zone. If you perceive that there's a narrowing or it's going to make it slower, then people go away. And businesses, you know, we are on 38th Avenue. Businesses locate on 38th Avenue because businesses want traffic flow. We do surveys of how customers find us. I saw you driving by. That's overwhelmingly how people find us. More than Yellow Pages, more than the internet, more than direct mail. It's by driving by. So I'm very concerned that if you're going to restrict traffic flow to my business, that's very detrimental to me. And saying that it's going to be temporary business or a temporary thing, and in 18 months we'll reevaluate it. And by the way, Mr. Reddick, if we're wrong, you have the right to come back and tell us. Okay. If I'm out of business, I don't have the right to come back and tell you, and I don't think the city is going to reimburse me for that. You know, if you guys want to bond yourself for my losses, then yeah, more power to you. But I don't think anybody up here is willing to risk their money, but you're risking a lot of, economic lives on 38th. And if I go away, if my rental store closes in Wheat Ridge, there'll only be one rental store left. So all of your citizens will have to go outside of the city of Wheat Ridge to rent equipment. And the closest 2 places are Home Depots. And then out of the one last thing I have, out of the customers I surveyed, a majority of them came from outside of Wheat Ridge. And that's what you want, right? You want people coming from outside your city, coming into your city, spending money to get that tax base up. And these are people that mostly are in North Denver, and they said they'll avoid 38th Avenue.
All right. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Deanna Sketlick from Anticity. Did I get your last name right? Okay. Okay. All right. Don Infante?
First of all, I'd like to thank you and pronounce my name right for a change. That was great. You guys did a lot of work here, and you put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate you being here tonight. You could be home watching Dancing with the Stars or something. But anyhow, I like to agree to disagree. I've always disagreed with 38th Avenue east of Harlan being different than west of Harlan. I personally think it looks good. I didn't agree with it when they first put it in. I don't see why they can't just continue that all the way to Wadsworth. It's a good-looking street. Why it would be different, I don't know. I don't understand it. And second of all, it may be off the subject, but I live at 38th and Robb, and work at 38th and almost Harlan, and I walk it all the time. When I walk that corridor and I go out to 38th and Robb, I get the other side of Harlan, and it's kind of scary. Why you would even consider putting a sidewalk, doing anything other than putting a sidewalk out there, I don't understand. There's kids walking that street every day. That to me would be first priority of anything. Oops, I just hit that thing, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, anyhow.
Don't need to worry about that.
Anyhow, that would be my first priority to do something like that. And as far as slowing traffic down, I think it's nonsense. If slower traffic doesn't bring more business. You know, if I'm driving down the street and I say, hey, there's a dentist, I think I'll go in and have a tooth removed. Slower traffic doesn't slow people down. I think it's really kind of nice the way it is. Many years ago, we did simple things. We bought flags for the street, 127 flags, put them on all the poles. You'd be amazed how that slowed the traffic down. People just like to see the flags. Something like that, to me, would be better than spending an arm and a leg to get the thing done. Anyhow, I just thought I'd make a couple comments, and I thank you again. And of course, we're all here, not to be negative, but we're here because we love Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Thomas Slattery? Oh, sorry. Yes, that's right. We have kind of a mix of comments on all the sheets, so I apologize. Frank States or Frank Stites? I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. If you come up, give us your name, address, and your comments, please.
My name is Frank Stites. I have a business at 38th and Quay. I've lived in Wheat Ridge almost all my life. Been in business over 50 years on 38th Avenue. I live at 3354 Zephyr Court in Wheat Ridge. I am concerned because the city has an engineered street that was done in the last few years, and it cost several $1 million to do it. I don't have any, we don't have people complaining about that street. But the problem is this: if you try to bring it down to 2 lanes and a passing lane. Those emergency vehicles who go by that shop every day, it'll scare you to death. Every time there is an emergency, there is a paramedic that goes first, the fire department goes second, and the police department goes third. If you have 2 lanes and you have a passing lane in the middle and there's somebody waiting to turn, you got a real problem. A real problem. If you talk about that street was made for safety and to move traffic. If you think about the future, Lutheran is not done expanding up there. When the big group comes in to expand where Cabela's wanted to go, They were projecting at that time 3 to 5 million vehicles a year going into that place. Well, that's a lot, but maybe it's so, because they were drawing from a wide circle of core. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people come out of North Denver, and they're going to funnel out 38th Avenue. So that has to be taken care of. And I think that the school districts now, they let out about 4 o'clock. Now, if you stand at 38th and Quay and you look at 38th and Pierce, you've got lanes going east that are tied up for over a block. If you put a single lane in, you got lane tied up for 2 blocks. So it really presents a problem. You've got to move the traffic, and you've got to move it safely. I have not heard a businessman complain about that street. Every one of them think that that street is fine. It looks good. It's had a lot of improvement to them over the years. And I think the merchants who are on that street are very proud of it. So I think that you really should consider the safety aspect, the costs of doing this thing. If you want to spend $216,000 to help that business district, buy the building at 38th and High Court that is attached to the city parking lot. Take it out. Expand that and put a nice looking parking lot in there, and you can save the 2 buildings to the west of it. If you don't, someday those buildings are going to have a problem. So I think these things are to be considered, and I would suggest leave the street alone. If you want to make improvements, make it behind the street, not in the street. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. As one of the parents driving a car backing up traffic on 38th with a student in it, I do apologize. I know it gets pretty crowded. Laszlo Nogi, or Nagy, once again, I apologize if I'm mangling people's names. No comment. Okay. Allison Hakala? Okay. Pete Mayman? Yeah, sure.
My name is Pete Mayman. I live on Eden Street, 3950 Eden Street. I guess I would just want to say, looking at this, when I'm driving down a street at 35 miles an hour right now, I find it kind of hard to look at businesses. I think I can understand what a lot of these businessmen are saying. At the same time, as a consumer, I know that, especially for the younger generation, we're using the internet. You find something, you go. So if you make in my opinion, it seems like, and there's been examples around Denver of this, where if you have an area of commerce specifically set out, people will go planning on spending money. So it's not just a commute, it's an area where they're going to spend money. And you spend money at one establishment, and you see everything else around there. So as far as what I see this plan doing is trying to attract people into this area to spend money, even from outside of Wheat Ridge. It's more than just people commuting. As far as the diversion, I really don't know, but I think it's something definitely to be looked at. I think it's a good idea. That's it.
Great. Thank you for your comments. We're going to take a short recess at the request of myself and some of the rest of the commission. We'll reconvene at 8:45. Thank you. We'll stand in recess till then. If I could have everybody take their seats, we're going to resume our meeting. If you could all take your seats, please. All right. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Just so everyone knows, we have about between 15 and 18 more folks who may or may not want to give some comments. So I would like to remind everyone to try and keep their comments to about 3 minutes so we can keep things moving. And with that, let's see. Mara Kripe on Eaton. If you could come up, give us your name, address, and comments, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Kripe. I live on 3950 Eaton Street. And I think it's a really good idea to make it thinner and more shoppable and walkable. And right now, when we moved in, I was like, Wheat Ridge, it just seems really dilapidated. Like the signs are all old looking, the paint looks bad. I don't know, I think it needs to be improved. And right now, when I go down the street, I'm afraid to even walk down it because it's so fast, and I would like to have a place to go and hang out, and I never noticed the rental shop before, and I've lived in this area for 3 or 4 years, and actually I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and I've seen a lot. When I was there, they did a lot of that change, and it was it's amazing what happened there. And even since I left and I go back to visit, it's gotten even better, and I'm just wow, look at all these businesses that have gone in, and it's just growing and growing, and I'd love to see that happen here. So I think it would be a great idea. I don't talk in front of people a lot, so kind of nervous, but thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Ted Hyde.
Good evening, members of the Commission. Thanks for your time tonight. I appreciate the context that Denise Balkus and Sarah Showalter established in terms of the 38th Ave corridor plan being kind of a long time coming, if you will. There have been a lot of studies completed prior to, and there are policies in the comprehensive plan to look at this section of 38th Ave as the city's downtown, as the city's main street. So there really is a context. And with that, I was a part of the process through attending all the community input sessions, for being a part of the stakeholder committee, to being on the staff committee. And it was interesting. Something I heard from at least 4 people was, well, where is the downtown in Wheat Ridge? We don't have a downtown in Wheat Ridge. I go to Old Town Arvada. I go to Belmar. I go to Golden. We don't have a downtown. We don't have a main street. So I think that's an important issue, both short and long term, that's before us tonight. So with that, I just want to touch on a few things that I think this vision, this corridor plan, does effectively capture, and reasons that Live Well Wheat Ridge is in support of it. First is community health. We've heard a lot about it tonight, a lot of it through Sarah's presentation, but this idea of taking this section of the corridor, mind you, all the while accommodating automobiles, not adversely affecting the level of service, but making this section of the corridor a more multimodal, pedestrian-friendly environment. I think of 2 uses right there. Wheat Ridge Middle School. I think of Stevens. I think of Highlands East and West. Wouldn't all those user groups alone benefit from a more pedestrian-friendly environment? Economic revitalization. It's on all of our minds. I get really excited when I read through this plan, and please, if you haven't read it, Chapter 5 specifically talking about the implementation, about the prospects for economic revitalization on this corridor. I really have to commend the work that Wheat Ridge 2020 has done over the last 2 to 3 years in terms of bringing businesses to the corridor. Folks, there's so much more potential. And this plan really sets a framework in place to bring a lot of businesses to the corridor, being mindful of the existing businesses that are already here, a very important piece. This whole issue of the road diet, it's a big one. Do we do it? Do we not do it? I've been a planner for 12 years. I have reviewed dozens of site plans, master plans, transit corridor plans. I've reviewed this plan in detail, and I can say with my professional opinion that this road diet is the very piece of this plan that is going to make it all work. If you don't do the road diet, this whole idea of creating a main street and a downtown of Wheat Ridge very well may not occur. So the road diet, I think, is a key piece. And now I'd appreciate it if you could just take 15 seconds to envision here. The downtown cores of the main streets of the following cities or towns surrounding us: Golden, Morrison, Old Town Arvada, Belmar and Lakewood, Louisville, Littleton, and Lafayette. Now put yourself there. Think about the downtown core. Commonality is none of them are defined by 4-lane roadways. They all have 2-lane streets with a turn lane in some cases. I'm not talking about it being exclusive of the automobile. 38th Ave will continue to function as an auto-friendly corridor to support the existing businesses that are there. But there are a lot of important reasons that are laid out in the corridor plan to adopt the road diet and to adopt the plan. So with that, I'd like to say that Live Well Wheat Ridge very much supports this plan, and I want to thank you for your consideration on this. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your comments. Tara Jean.
Hi, I'm a resident in the corridor, just off of 36th and High Court, so within the study zone. And I moved to Wheat Ridge in 2009, September 2009. I had spent a few months looking to buy a house on the Highlands side of Sheridan. When I was priced out of that area, I did some research in some of the community development that Wheat Ridge had been doing. I read the comprehensive plan, and even though it was in draft form at that point, one of the things that convinced me that Wheat Ridge was the place that I wanted to start looking and then ultimately find a home in was that the concept of getting to be a part of something and getting to be a part of the change that you all envisioned for your own community to be a part of, and now my community to be a part of. And so the last 2 years I've spent trying to be an active agent in that change, taking the Wheat Ridge 2020 Planning Academy, joining the Stakeholders Committee for 38th Avenue, because I believe in making your own community what you want to see it become. And one of the things that struck me most from the presentation that Sarah made, and that continues to inspire me by being part of this process, is represented in the vision that was at the beginning of the presentation, the vision of what 38th Avenue could look like. And so just as Ted kind of said, spend a second and envision some of those downtowns, I would counter that and say, spend a few minutes now or at home with your family and think of the words that were a part of that vision, like identity, pride, destination, an opportunity to live, work, learn, shop, play, and vibrancy. Being a part of something that's not dilapidated, that you can feel pride to invite your friends to have dinner with you. Like, there's options of restaurants that you'd actually like to go out to and not have to give people MapQuest directions because they have no idea where you're talking about. I understand a lot of the arguments that have been, or not arguments, but the points that have been brought up about slowing down traffic and things like that. And I think it begs the question of what kind of community and what kind of downtown do we want to have. Everyone's worried about diversion from 38th Avenue and the slowing of traffic. However, do we and our families want a community that people only drive through and don't drive to? You know, yes, 38th Avenue might be slowed down 20 to 40 seconds, but maybe in our lives we need to slow down 20 or 40 seconds. And for the people who only value our community to go through it, maybe they can take I-70, and get stuck in traffic there, because we can focus our efforts on creating a place where we can walk our families to, where there's a variety of businesses that we can support and not only worry about one business that might not be compatible with the vision of a family-oriented downtown. And that's not to say that one business is better than the other, but there are multiple businesses that have investments on that. And so to say that one is more valuable than 10. It's kind of a hard discussion to have. But knowing that Ceviche was one of the restaurants that we all anticipated opening, it opened. I was there the next day and have been there 3 more times with my mom, with my friends, and that's one of the things like I would like to see more of as a resident in the community of Wheat Ridge and living on the corridor. I walked to Ceviche the other day, and it's a nice opportunity to be able to support businesses that are around the corner. So, thank you.
Great.
Tara Jan.
Thanks for your comments. Tim Reed.
Tim Reed, I'm Director of Facility Planning for Jeffco Schools. Our position on things like this tends to be neutral, but I do want to stress that we've worked closely with the staff of Wheat Ridge. We've shared information concerning the schools, and we look forward to continue that good relationship to ensure the safety of both our students and bus drivers and parents that take their kids to school. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Karen Thaler. All right, we're down to the last sheet. Can I just say that? I say that jokingly. I am in the middle of this. I'm just going to say I'm so overjoyed as a resident who lives near 38th to see people who have been here for a long time, new residents, owners of businesses, and homeowners all here to comment. It's just, I can't tell you how valuable this information is for everyone up here. Sharon Rogers, would you like to say anything? Great.
I've never done this before, but since I have a business in Wheat Ridge for 35 years, I wonder how we're going to have the snow removal working with the streets there, with all the trees and that. How do they plan on having that? Because it gets to be a hell of a mess when there's snow on 4 lanes now. And I had a lot of people ask me about this, if it's going to be slowing down traffic a lot, and that's what was my concern. Because we get right by the fire station, I'm right by the bike shop, I'm right by the A1. I've been there for years, so I don't want to be affected, because most people I know, since we're the baby boomers, we're the majority of the families, but my business doesn't all come from Wheat Ridge. It comes from all over, and I just want them to make sure that they can get in there and get out without a big pain in the fanny. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Lloyd Rogers.
Lloyd Rogers, co-owner of Bizarre Hair Fashions with Sharon, you just heard. 138th, next to the bike shop. I have some comments about 2 or 3 items. The bicycle bit. I commuted 12 miles each way to work for about 10 years by bicycle. I wouldn't ride 38th with or without a lane. I prefer the streets. The paths are not for commuting, they're for recreation. So I think 35th Avenue would be, in my opinion, a darn good place for that. In one of the slides, it said that the Vancouver speed was reduced by 18% by doing this street diet. Now, I'm confused about how that's going to move more traffic or even the same traffic. You take out 50% of the lanes and reduce the speed. Seems to me that if you take a hose and you cut it in half size and slow the speed the water runs through it, your bucket's going to fill a lot slower. So I'm really skeptical of that. Arvada was alluded to about downtown Arvada. Also, the roads in Golden. Frankly, I avoid that area. I live in Arvada. But it's just a dang nuisance to try and travel through it. Pardon me. When I do travel through it, I'm not looking for where I can go spend my money. I already know where I'm going. What do we have? I don't think that dieting the street will increase our customer base at all. People come to us as a destination already established. And the last comment I have is, if you should decide to diet the street, I would like to know if you have a criteria goal at the end of that for a trial period that would be a no-go gauge, and say, yes, it worked, no, it didn't, based upon traffic flow and tax revenue from the businesses along that area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Kevin Helm. Okay. All right. Let's see. Larry Merkel. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Larry Merkel. I live in the neighborhood off of 34th Place in Teller. There's a couple of concerns I have. Right now, if there's a wreck on Wadsworth, everybody gets off, drives down 34th, 35th, dumps over onto Teller, tries to get down to 38th. They get to 38th, and they try to get back so they can get back to Wadsworth, or they head for Denver, Sheridan, Pierce. You take 38th Avenue, which is 4 lanes, and it gets to Teller. You put it down into 2 lanes. They got a choice. They can either fight that mess or turn up Teller, come up, go over the hill, and get to 32nd and go to Denver. We have a heck of a time getting out of our neighborhood now. If you want to go to Safeway, sometimes you got to go to Pierce or High Court because you can't even turn to get across Teller on 38th Avenue. This is just going to make it worse for everybody who lives in that neighborhood and wants to even shop over at Safeway. Secondly, I almost think this plan was put together by the Lakeside Mountain View Chamber of Commerce. Lakeside's getting ready to build a brand new Walmart. We're going to take and restrict traffic coming down our main business street and try to get it to go down Sheridan and maybe down 44th and get it out of Wheat Ridge. Lakeside loves it. You get our traffic, you run it down there, run it through Lakeside, that's where they'll spend their money. They're not going to go down 38th Avenue. And I don't care what anybody, with all these big plans, nobody's going to walk from one end of that street to the other. It isn't going to happen. A lot of us don't walk to Safeway now. And we're not going to walk up and down 38 to go to a few shops. The next thing, I heard talk about the great road that they've done up in Golden, on South Golden Road. Well, if you've driven it, South Golden Road is 4 lanes. And it's 4 lanes all the way from downtown, one way the other. 4 lanes, round traffic circles, until you get to the New King Supers at Ulysses, becomes 2 lanes in each direction. Downtown Littleton, great place. I love it. You shoot into downtown Littleton, 1 way, 2 lanes. 1 way coming back, 2 lanes. Bumper to bumper. It's not right through their downtown. Louisville, yeah, they have a real nice downtown in Louisville. They also have a 4-lane bypass on McCaslin and a whole bunch of other ways, so you don't even have to go to their downtown because you can get around that town by going over, say, to a 44th. All you're going to do is put more traffic on 32nd, Teller, Mountain View, Lakeside, but you're not going to help any of the businesses, and you're not going to help our neighborhoods in Wheat Ridge. We're going to be stuck in there and have to find a new way out.
Thanks for your comments. Tracy Volkman. Sorry, is that Voigtman or Volk? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My
My name is Tracy Volkman, and I'm an environmental health specialist with Jefferson County Public Health. I recently reviewed the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan and would like to commend the diligence of the Wheat Ridge planning staff and the community for moving this plan forward. The Jefferson County Public Health Department would like to go on record in support of the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan. My main responsibility at the Health Department is to review land use cases and provide feedback to applicants on how their proposed plans may impact the public's health via the use of and to the impact of the environment. When I conduct plan reviews, I look for many of the environmentally beneficial design principles and features that are included in the corridor plan. The plan thoroughly promotes an enhanced multimodal environment, improving the built environment to better accommodate pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users can help reduce harmful auto emissions through modal shift, meaning that some will opt to make shorter trips of less than a mile on foot, bike, or the bus instead of taking the car. This has obvious benefits to air quality. Assuming this modal shift is made for some trips within and through the study area, this would contribute to a reduction of noise typically associated with automobile traffic. Such a reduction in ambient noise would benefit the corridor and support the vision of the plan to make this a pleasant downtown Main Street environment. Traffic calming is another key consideration. As you know, the plan proposes a road diet through restriping for a majority of the study area. Road diet case studies from throughout the United States have been shown to successfully calm traffic, reduce speeds, and increase motorist awareness, while not adversely affecting vehicular operations. Taken together, reduced traffic speeds coupled with an enhanced multimodal environment can improve operational safety and reduce conflicts between cars and other user groups such as pedestrians and cyclists. Finally, according to the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention, changes to built environment founded on healthy community design have been shown to increase physical activity, reduce incidence of auto-related injuries, decrease mental health stresses, increase access to healthy food choices, improve air and water quality, and strengthen the social fabric of a community. Thank you for your time, and the Health Department looks forward to following this project through the council hearings and hopes for a successful adoption. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Brandy Wilson.
Hi, my name is Brandy Wilson. I am one of the owners of Fran's Cafe. I would just like to say that the majority of the people that come to my cafe are senior citizens from the high-rises in the neighborhood, and if you go forward with this plan, it will take out the driveway, the parking lot, directly out front of my restaurant and the hair salon. And if the seniors can't park right out front, they're not going to come. And a lot of those people aren't going to just want to walk around the street. They can't just parallel park their car and walk 3 or 4 blocks down. And same thing with A1 construction. If those people can't get in and get out, why are they going to come? They're not there to walk around the neighborhood. They're there for the construction, or they're there to get their hair done. They're there for the cafe, and they want to get home because they're just a little elderly and don't want to be walking all over the streets. That's all I'd like to say.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Jana Pint.
Hi, I'm Jana Pint. I'm part owner in Fran's Cafe on 38th, and I'm opposed to this. If it's the streets are dieted down, as it's called. I think people from Sheridan coming onto 38th, Wadsworth coming onto 38th, if they realize it's going down to a dieted street like this, they're going to avoid it. I would. I wouldn't want to get caught in the traffic. Anyone that goes ahead and goes on that street, they're not going to be looking around. They're going to get from one end to the other and get off. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Paula Reedy, ready? Okay. Buzz Calkins.
Good evening. My name is Buzz Calkins, and my family owns the Bradley gas station on 38th and Vance and the self-service gas station on 38th and Pierce. And without repeating what a lot of people said tonight, I'd like to go on the record as being opposed to this plan. I think what I've learned tonight and what you can see when you go drive down 38th, a lot of these businesses, I kind of would divide businesses into two different groups, either a destination business or an impulse business. And I think most of these businesses that are here tonight and most of the businesses on 38th fit in the category of impulse businesses, which by that I mean businesses where you're not necessarily intending to go there, but you're driving down the street, you see it, in our instance, you see a gas price, and if it's a price that you like, you pull in there. And they're convenience businesses where you can get in there easily, get out easily, make it quick. And our concern, like some of the other people tonight, is when you do, whether it's perceived or actual, I think perception is going to go a long way here. But I think we're going to lower the amount of vehicles that are going down 38th. And I think when that happens, we're going to lose a substantial amount of business. And I'm not positive the way these other businesses work, but just briefly, the way the gas station business works is we rely on volume. We have a pretty high fixed cost, and if we can't get the volume over that fixed cost, we're done. So, we're borderline there right now, but who knows what this will do to it. But I just know in other instances around town where we've had similar plans like this, it hasn't turned out very well for our type businesses. And I would support this type of plan in certain areas. It just doesn't seem like this is the right area. Like down in the Highlands, down on Tennyson, it seems like you have a higher density of historic buildings that are walkable to each other. It's easier to renovate an old building than go and construct a new building, a lot less expensive. And I think they're a lot more conducive to this type of plan. So I'm not against the type of plan. I just think 38th is the wrong place for this, and I think the majority of the businesses which we've seen tonight would probably agree with that. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and again, I'd just like to go on the record as being opposed.
Thank you. Britta Fisher.
Good evening. I'm Britta Fisher. I'm the Executive Director of Wheat Ridge 2020. I'm also a resident of District 1. I have been walking and biking to commute to work for the last several years to our offices at 38th and Marshall. And I have to say, as a pedestrian, it's been difficult in the snow. It's been difficult from RTD buses feeling like their mirrors are going to clip me. And biking, I just wouldn't bike on 38th either, so I just wanted to reiterate a couple of those points. A lot of what I do in my job is listening to people, listening to many of the property owners and businesses, the residents, and trying to find solutions that are going to move our community forward. A few of the things that I've heard and that I've seen really relate to this idea of vision. And what we've seen as Wheat Ridge 2020 is we are one of the flag bearers for vision for progress in our community. And people get energy from that. They want to be part of that. They want to see energy and vibrancy be restored in Wheat Ridge. Many of the residents that want to be a part of that, many of the businesses that want to be a part of that are starting to come back to Wheat Ridge. I also do hear complaints about 38th. Some of them were stated earlier that, I just drive through, there's not places that I want to hang out with my friends, spend time and spend money. If the flow of our traffic isn't spending money, what has it done for us? We need to find ways to get that flow to stop. And not just to go to one business of convenience, but to go to multiple destinations. When you look at economic development that's been successful, you see successful business clusters, where people start locating together and people want to stop in one place and shop at multiple places. Grab a bite to eat in between. We can look at a lot of the details of this plan. This is right now very conceptual. And one of the things I wanted to do was offer to the businesses that haven't met with the city or with Wheat Ridge 2020, make sure you call me or call Sarah. We're happy to talk about those details because sometimes the things that you think may happen aren't really in the plan. And there's sometimes things that we can do to mitigate as well. I also do hear the concerns of businesses. I think one of the things that's really difficult for us is this has been an exceptionally hard time for business. The last 3 years have just been very difficult, and the idea of any change is very scary. What's it going to do to my business? At the same time, it's that same reality that's drawing some businesses to our corridor. They want to be a part of that change. They think they can be investors and move forward. Places like Ceviche, Compass Construction, and I'd just like to point out that little building at 38th and High Court that was recommended to be raised into a parking lot, we're actually selling it in 2 weeks to a pizza pasta pub that wants to be a part of this future. So I think that's the direction of our community, the direction that we need to go. And whether you have concerns or not, I'd invite you to talk with the city and talk with Wheat Ridge 2020. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Jeff Sy. Sorry about that.
Yeah, this is my wife.
Okay.
I have to agree with most of the business owners. I'm totally opposed against this. I think that if you cut down the traffic on 38th, it's going to go somewhere else. And I live on 32nd, and that's probably where it's going to go. I've lived in this city all my life, and I've watched them widen that street 3 times. And now you want to cut it down to a 2-lane road, what it was when I was a kid, and I just don't see it being a very good idea. On top of the fact that, listening to everybody, what are you going to do with all the sidewalks and the maintenance? I mean, there's going to be a lot of crews that are going to have to be out there because I watch it now, and there's quite a few businesses like myself out there. I work right next to A1 Rental there at Dave's Automotive, and I'd say 50% of the businesses on that street scoop the sidewalks. The rest of them don't get scooped. Same thing on 32nd. I mean, I see it all over. And you think that people are going to walk from place to place in the snow? I just don't see it. And I really don't agree with this idea. I don't see why you can't revitalize some of the buildings that are there instead of destroying them and bringing something else in. I mean, you can't get the buildings filled that are there now. Why do you think that redoing the street is going to make it that much better and bring that much more business in?
And my biggest concerns is they've talked about the golden stuff and everything, and that was exactly my thoughts. These are four-lane roads. I work for Jefferson County. I work in juvenile justice. What you're proposing with the schools scares me. And I mean, maybe the school's on board for this, but I work in dropout prevention. I work in truancy issues. And if these kids have a place to go other than school, they'll be there. There's safety concerns about them walking. There's safety concerns about the buses, as they are right now. Just like they said, they've cut down on the busing and cut down on schools already, and they're all clustered in these 2 little schools right there in the middle of this corridor. It's going to be a mess, and I see big problems, especially for the kids. And then on 32nd, when you do have this diet, they're going to go to 32nd, and they're going to run. I call it I-32 that I live on, because it's already a busy street. It's already very fast traveled. Buses get pulled over for speeding. We've been rear-ended getting into our driveway. We have bikes that are all over the place. It's a mess, and these cars are going to keep going, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse on 32nd. And we live there. We have kids, and there's kids all over 32nd. They have to play, and they have to play on basically what I call I-32. It's not a safe place, and this is a bad plan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments. All right, that's everybody on the list. Are there others who would like to come up and give any comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Slattery.
Thomas Slattery, yes. I'm not really that familiar with the plan. I've never taken a stand on it. One thing I didn't hear mentioned is the RTD buses. You're going to have pullouts for them. And how are these pullouts and stops going to relate to business development and the general circulation of the area? That's really all I wanted to say.
All right, we'll see if we can shed some light on that. Talk to staff. Yes.
I just wanted to know, are you trying to propose all this and then get a vote from the community, or what? This is why I never did show up to the other meetings, because I thought I had to be a resident.
What we are doing tonight is we are, as it says, all right. We are here to consider a resolution recommending adoption of the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan as it is drafted currently, perhaps with whatever amendments maybe we feel we should send with it, as an amendment to the Wheat Ridge Comprehensive Plan, and then forwarding that recommendation to the City Council. So after we deal with it here, it then goes to City Council, where they will then deliberate it in public hearing as well. So as with most legislative items, we're but one stop on the route to sort of the final plan. So that's where it stands right now. And as you heard from Ms. Showalter, this is an intermediate step. There have been a lot of planning sessions and so forth, as you know, before this. So if no one else would like to give a comment, what we'll do is maybe ask some more questions of staff based on your comments and try and get some feedback, and then do some other stuff. Is there anyone else who would like to give a comment? Okay. All right. Do we have further questions for staff? George?
I just want to, since Tom, our last question was related to RTD bus, I guess I'd just ask staff to clarify. I do recall asking last time this was before us that RTD had been approached in the planning process of this, as well as seeing something in this report indicating that they generally don't recommend turnouts for streets with speed limits below 40 miles an hour. I just wanted to see if that's your understanding.
I can start, and I might defer if Tim wants to add anything from the traffic engineering standpoint, but I do know that the statement you just made is correct, that they generally don't recommend the pullouts, but from what I read in the traffic analysis as well from the consultants, the analysis, however, did show that at Harlan and Pierce, those intersections that have signals, we would want to provide a right-hand turn lane because they have, in order to keep an acceptable level of service at those intersections. And the proposal is that those right-hand turn lanes could actually be extended long enough so that it could actually serve as a bus pullout, because they're actually some of the higher ridership as well. The highest ridership is at Sheridan and Wadsworth, where we're not proposing any changes. But those are the next highest, kind of at those where those streets intersect with 38th. So we would be providing the RTD bus pullouts there. And generally, RTD does have routes all over the city on streets that carry, similar amounts of cars per day, where they don't have the pullouts. But we would the plan does call for adding them at least those 2 locations.
Thank you for that. Randy made a comment in her her question or her comment about removal of parking lot. I know that there was a discussion about curb cuts and access, but not removing access or removing parking lots, and I just wanted a clarification in case I missed something when I looked at the report.
No, that's correct. I was surprised to hear that. I'm not sure why there was the perception that the parking will be lost, because that's not proposed for any business. Actually, right now, at least in the short term, there's the restriping that is proposed would not impact anything on private property. It's all in the public right-of-way. So if you have parking on your property, that wouldn't go away. It does recommend the idea of trying to do some demonstration curb cut, either making them less in width or consolidating them, as I mentioned, but that would be done in cooperation with business owners. That's very clear in the plan. But that's just about trying to make parking lots work better. In some cases where you have one really big curb cut, it can actually be really confusing for customers to know where to enter and exit. And we would do that in cooperation with property owners, and certainly would not be taking out the parking spaces. It's not considered in the plan.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Many comments obviously related specifically to reduction of traffic flow, as well as speeds. But I guess I wanted a clarification again, making sure that I'm reading the report correctly, that in fact the traffic flow is predicted and planned to increase, including the rate of increase, so that and I think you showed it in that chart, that we're actually projecting a higher rate of increase over the next several years as opposed to a reduction. Is that the right interpretation?
Yeah, what the chart was showing was the assumption of how many cars would be on the street, so that it could test, okay, we need a certain number of cars actually driving the street at peak hour to see what happens at each intersection, to understand how much longer you have to wait at a light. And so the base assumption was that instead of using the number of cars that are actually on the street today, we grew that by 15%. So we don't know for sure that's how much traffic would increase. We were just anticipating that hopefully we would see more traffic on the street in the future.
One sec. So just to clarify, you're basically assuming a greater than projected increase for the purposes of the analysis. You were sort of inflating that peak.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Scott.
I have a kind of out there question. Has there ever been any discussion for a bus rapid transit route with RTD?
No, that did not come up. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for staff? Mark?
Has there been any studies about surveys from impulse buyers versus destination buyers, in terms of along the corridor? Because that seems to be one of the major issues that I've heard tonight.
No, there's not been any studies on that topic. I mean, anecdotally, we've heard from some communities that even the impulse business can actually do well because people are more likely to actually notice the businesses rather than flying by. But we don't have there was no data or studies done related to 38th on that topic.
Okay.
Steve? Tracy? Any more follow-up? Just a couple of questions. Dick, did you have some? Okay. We had a couple of concerns about snow removal. I think there was something in the report about in one of the phases of implementation, maybe looking at mandating some requirements for snow removal, maybe even not just on 38th, but maybe citywide. I know, in comparison with Denver, where I used to live, I got conditioned to going out there and shoveling like a maniac as soon as it started snowing because the ordinance kind of required that. But Wheat Ridge doesn't have a requirement like that currently, correct?
That's correct.
So one of the things that I think in the plan you guys are considering, that we are considering tonight, is maybe a phased implementation of looking at some sort of mandated snow removal to address concerns for pedestrian traffic, increased pedestrian traffic.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's something, obviously, that would be an ordinance the council would have to address, or would that come through us? Or
It would definitely go to city council. I'm not sure.
That wouldn't be us.
Since it's not in the zoning code, it probably would not come to planning commission, but it would have to go to city council.
Okay. All right. Concerns about reducing capacity. Do we? I didn't. Maybe I just missed it in the traffic report. Which, by the way, if members of the public want to look at that traffic report, is that included in the online documentation that we have?
It is what's online, because the file is rather large. There's one PDF that's the actual plan, and then another PDF that's the appendices.
Okay.
And the traffic analysis is one of the appendices. I
would recommend anybody who has who wants to study the traffic flow. It's a very comprehensive in terms of analysis of right turn lanes at Pierce Street off of westbound 38th, and all the sort of permutations off of all these various streets. So if you have some specific questions, that might be a good place to start. Maybe in preparation for some comments you might want to make at City Council. In terms of capacity, do we know what the built capacity for 38th is? Like right now, if when it was designed and built out to the size and capacity that it is now, how much traffic is it designed to accommodate at the moment? Do we have data for that? Tim?
I didn't bring that information. We have it available, and I just don't remember exactly what the 4-lane capacity is here at this location. I can tell you that the capacity, exceeds the 20,000, 17 to 20,000 we have. The 17 to 20,000 cars that we have on 38th is right on the bubble for a 3-lane facility. And so that's why the recommendation of a road diet works, is it is at that break point where you can still get that much traffic through a 3-lane facility, and certainly the 4-lane facility, as you all see today, easily carries that traffic load.
Okay, thank you. Mr. C, did you have another question or comment? Yes. Actually, the RTD is covered in the study. It wasn't addressed in the presentation. It's Sarah, would you like to maybe talk a little bit about the cutouts? I know that there are two sort of right turn in lanes or right turn lanes at I believe Pierce and Harlan that are part of the plan that could accommodate buses. The Kendall Street stop in front of the senior center is not planned to be a turnout because of the ridership there. Is that correct?
Well, generally, yeah, first of all, I just want to clarify that the traffic analysis that was done did account for the RTD bus line, just to make that clear. And then, yes, the recommendation was that there would be bus pullouts at Harlan and Pierce.
Okay. Any further questions? I think I've got what I need. Anyone? Okay. So we have a motion. Discussion. Discussion. All right. So I'll close the public hearing now, right? Yes. Okay. We're going to close the public portion of the hearing and enter into discussion. That doesn't mean you have to leave. It just means we're going to stop chattering quite so much and start chattering amongst ourselves. Yes. Ann.
So as I listened to everybody, again, thank everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. It's very important. I was struck by an interesting thing. This plan is made up of two components, the redesign of 38th and the vision and the revitalization of the corridor. Everyone's concentrating on the road diet. We should be focusing on the revitalization of 38th and how to get it moving forward, personally. What we have now is not working. Simply dressing up the street in 2001 did not work. It did not move us forward. It made it pretty, but it did not move us forward. It did not help with the vacancy rate, in my opinion. In the last 10 years since we dressed up the streets, Denver, Golden, Arvada, Lakewood, they all boomed. We have remained stagnant. Our vacancy rate has gone up on 38th Avenue. We have had some revitalization, and I want to call out those businesses that have done it. Thank you very much. You're leading the way. It's great. But overall vacancy rate has increased, and things are just kind of staying at the status quo. I live in District 1. I walk 38th. I walk 38th at night a lot. Now, granted, I have a big dog, but I walk 38th at night. I walk 38th during the day. I don't have any problems with it, but I see walking speed all the vacancies. I can't believe we cannot fill Marks. We can't fill that place. We can't rent it out. I can't believe that some of these really architecturally interesting buildings we can't fill, because we have a lot of them. We really do. You might be going so fast you can't see them, but I've lived in this city almost 18 years. I've participated in numerous studies of 38th. I don't know how many of you have, but I don't have enough fingers, I don't think. We have to move forward on this. We have to do something. We cannot just assume to leave it alone and assume that revitalization is going to happen, because we had a little economic boom in the early 2000s, and we didn't participate in it. All the other cities around us did, and we did not. So I will be voting for this, not just for the road diet, but for the revitalization vision for 38th Avenue. Thank you.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, I do definitely support the multimodal concept, and the vision of what 38th Avenue along there looks like is truly beautiful. However, I don't think that simply slowing traffic is the key to increasing the vitality of that corridor. If simply slowing traffic worked, every merchant in the city of Wheat Ridge would call up and ask to have a school zone installed in front of their shop. So I think that the total package, the package of landscaping, the package of building to the front and the road dieting, I think the combination is what works. But doing one is simply, you're just limping down the road. I was really pleased with what happened along Wadsworth. We started out and we did a comprehensive plan. We started from scratch and did mixed-use zoning. We put the laws in place, and then we did a complete mass rezoning along Wadsworth. And that process all went smooth because it started out with the summit on Wadsworth, where we got the business owners and the property owners involved early in the process. Now, I may be just prolonging the agony, but I move to continue the public hearing until October 20th and request that in the meantime, the staff
have the opportunity to work with the property owners and the businessmen along 38th Avenue to see if you can get buy-in. Because the one thing I know for certain is the business owners and the property owners that came and talked to us tonight are the people that we're going to be looking for leadership to bring all of the business districts and stuff like that forward. So I will be making that motion. I am making that motion.
I was going to say, you've put a motion forward.
And I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right. If there's no discussion, we'll vote on the motion.
And the motion fails with Matthews and Gildner voting for the motion.
Some more. Okay. George?
I'm going to turn my microphone on first. I want to say thank you first to a bunch of people, really. First of all, Sarah, and Sarah knows, and some of you know, that I spent a lot of time on 38th Avenue with graduate students and living 2 doors off of the corridor, and I know how complicated it is, and this package is really an incredibly comprehensive, well put together document, and I know you put a ton of time into it, and I appreciate it very much. As well as thanking all of the stakeholders who are either here present tonight and have participated in the various workshops, etc., and all the people who spoke tonight, even in opposition. I share Alan's feeling that regardless of what brought you here tonight, the fact that you're motivated to come and talk about it is very important to us. With that said, I will vote in favor of this. I don't think, the way I read this, that the intent is to take traffic away from the corridor. Frankly, I read this and truly believe that the intent is to bring people to 38th Avenue, and that it doesn't just, passively imply that it actually says that in this document, and that the actions of this document taken as a collection, and I will accept what Commissioner Matthews is saying, that there are several actions working together that are important, but taking those together, that this is intended to bring people to the corridor. And I don't think I heard anyone tonight who would be in disagreement of that. Everyone who stood up, whether they were for this or against this, want business vitality and want vitality on this street and want to bring people to the street. So that's good news. We can all agree on that. I personally read this as that being the prime intent of this plan, and I agree with the methods. I look forward. I've said this before when we've discussed this. I look forward to the leadership committee being impaneled as soon as possible, and for that committee to have real responsibilities, authority defined, so that we can truly move forward. And Ann said it very well. She's been here for a while and has gone through a lot of iterations of planning, and it's absolutely time to move forward and implement this. I think that leadership commission or committee is very important to that, and I hope that it's defined in such a way that allows it to be an active, productive committee and actually help implement these things. Selfishly, I would ask that the Community Development Department and Wheat Ridge 2020 seriously consider that at least one member of the Planning Commission be on that leadership committee, preferably, obviously, from District 1 or 2.
Okay. Scott?
I think at first when I looked at the road diet, I was really concerned about traffic slowing down, and I really thought that maybe this wasn't the right direction. This was several years ago, and since then I've really turned around, and I've started to see the vision. the amount of work, I know everybody doesn't have this report sitting in front of them, but the amount of work that has been put before us, it's incredible of how much data there is. And it's really kind of indisputable when you start looking at all the different facts of where we're at. I mean, and I know back in 2009, 2010, that I literally, as I was driving down 38th between Wadsworth and Sheridan, I counted 30-plus businesses for sale or lease, and I thought, wow, that is really depressing. We can do so much better than this, and it's going to take a lot of energy from everybody and input from everybody to really make a successful project. And I feel like this is kind of the turning point, you know, for everybody to, you know, to feel the synergy and start moving forward as a city, you know, for generations where we're at right now. So I strongly support this.
Thanks, Scott. Any discussion from the left side?
I do. I just want to, I've been a small business owner, no longer am I, but I understand their concerns. Downtown Golden been downtown Golden forever. Belmar was built the way it was built. I just have some, I mean, just with like the business owners, I'm concerned for them being there. Marks, as far as Marks goes, has anybody checked in to see what they want for rent, to rent that place? Sorry. And the problems with it? I want to see this, I want to see it go through. I do. But as far as the diet on the street, I'm not sure if I'm for that right now. With the businesses, I know they're growing, but some of them still need, we don't want to chase the businesses off we have there either.
Mark or Steve? No. Well, just for myself, I want to echo everyone else's comments that I really appreciate all the effort that Sarah and the planning folks put into preparing the report, doing the studies, assembling all of this information. It's, like I said, I'll say it again, go online, download that enormous appendix PDF. It's got a ton of information in it. I spent an hour and a half looking at the traffic study this week, and I'm not really a guy who likes who likes anything with big numbers in them, but it was very compelling because this is I live in District 1. I represent District 1 here with Ann, and it's I have a personal vested interest in it as a resident, as a business owner, and you know, I think that the road diet is just a component of this. It's part of a whole, a more comprehensive solution to revitalizing 38th from Sheridan over to Wadsworth. If you've to use Mr. Rogers' really good metaphor, hose metaphor, if you have a hose, and it's only half full of water, it's okay to use a smaller hose if you can use that other space where the hose would be for other things that might benefit the community and the businesses around it. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at the road diet as a means to a larger end, not just to optimize traffic flow or make the street more efficient, but to put the area around the street to better use for the businesses and the community as a whole. I don't think it's a perfect plan. I think, you know, it does the best it can with the information we've got. I would have liked to have seen maybe more done with just not 38th, but expanding over to 35th and even starting to touch 44th a little bit. I think there are issues maybe with that are going to come up with signaling, especially around the school and the fact that the schools are being so condensed and consolidated with Martinson closing. But I think those are all things that can be addressed. I think this is the first step forward. It's not the first step. It's the first series of steps forward, and I certainly support this. And I think if there's no more discussion, we'll entertain motions. Yeah, you need a...
Sorry. I move to adopt Resolution 02-2011, a resolution recommending adoption of the 38th Avenue Corridor Plan as an amendment to the Wheat Ridge Comprehensive Plan, Envision Wheat Ridge, and forwarding said recommendation to the Wheat Ridge City Council for the meeting on, Sarah?
October 10th.
For the big meeting on October 10th.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote then, please. All right. I'd like to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart for coming. I appreciate all of your comments. We appreciate all of your comments. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Vote, sorry. We can call that unanimous, and thank you all.